I want to bring in NBC's Garrett Haake, who covers the Trump campaign. Also joining us, MSNBC political analyst and former communications director for Jeb Bush back in 2016, Tim Miller. Here with me in studio, Democratic strategist and co-founder of Lift Our Voices, Julie Roginski. Good to have all of you here. So, Julie, what do you think's happening here?
Oh, please. They're panicking. But look, Donald Trump has been on record as saying maybe a 15-week ban is not such a bad thing. I mean, he's been going back and forth on this. He's bragged about abolishing Roe versus Wade. He appointed the 3 justices who did abolish Roe versus Wade. We don't have to listen, like to paraphrase Elvis Presley, a little less conversation, a little more action. We know what the action has been. The action has been to deprive women of their rights. J.D. Vance has been very clear about being 100% pro-life. And above and beyond that, he wouldn't even vote to uphold IVF. He wouldn't even vote to make sure that IVF was legal. This is as extreme as it gets, so I don't really take what J.D. Vance says at face value. We know what they're going to do because we know what Donald Trump has done before. Garrett,
we're seeing a couple of different things about Donald Trump's messaging from members of his own party. Even Tom Cotton asked repeatedly to answer about the Trump campaign policy. Didn't want to go there. He basically put it on Kamala Harris. And I want to play for you what Lindsey Graham had to say.
What exactly is Donald Trump going to do to, quote unquote, help women's reproductive rights?
Yeah, no, you need to ask him about that.
You need to ask him about that. So what is the position?
Yeah, Chris, I'll try to ask him the next chance I get here. I mean, look, when it comes to abortion rights, Donald Trump's official position has been to kick this issue to the states. This is something that he hopes will take this issue and take some of the air out of it. He knows it's a huge motivating issue for Democrats and for women nationwide. And he and his campaign don't want it to be a deciding issue in this election. The problem with that position is it basically means he's responsible for Georgia's position or California's position or the near total abortion restriction in my home state of Texas. And he has to essentially defend all of those positions. The way he's done that is to try to wash his hands of it and say things like what he posted on Truth Social over the weekend, and this is a quote: "My administration will be great for women and their reproductive rights." Now, to me, that's kind of like Michael Scott in The Office declaring bankruptcy. You don't just say it to make it true. There's no real specific policy background to that in any way, and I think the Trump campaign's general view of this issue is they mostly just want it to go away or to be subsumed by other issues on which he and they feel more confident going into the fall.
Tim, I thought it was fascinating. Tony Perkins, as you know, the president of the Family Research Council, reacted to that Truth Social post from Donald Trump. And this is what he wrote. "My advice is when you're in a hole, stop digging. This week made clear the DNC has the corner on the abortion market. Trump is not only suppressing his own support, he is going to hurt the vast majority of Republican candidates who are 100% pro-life. So why take this on?"
Yeah, well, I think that Tony Perkins has given some bad political advice there. I guess I think Trump, for all of his flaws, is more attuned to the political risk of the position, the extreme position that a lot of Republicans have taken in these red states, as Garrett pointed out, on the issue of abortion and the concerns about national abortion ban. Look, I mean, a lot of this is like J.D. Vance is trying to play this hypothetical game about like what would you do if a bill comes, you know, before their desk or whatever. But like the reality is, Trump going in after the overturn of Roe, after Dobbs, his entire staff would be staffed with people that Tony Perkins likes, right? And so Donald Trump is just trying to put a more palatable public face on an administration that would be very extreme in trying to pass anti-abortion policies across a number of verticals via HHS and other, you know, administrative, using other administrative functions.
I'm just trying to figure out if you think he can make any progress in terms of winning voters over for whom this issue matters. I mean, I think we can all agree that this probably doesn't have much impact on the way pro-life voters will vote. They're clearly not going to vote for Kamala Harris. So how do you make it work on the other end? Do you think people are going to buy the fact that he has not said multiple times, I got Roe v. Wade overturned? It was my Supreme Court that did that. I appointed these Supreme Court justices.
Yeah, look, there are going to be a lot of people he can never win over because of all that, Chris. And you saw this in the midterms, how big of an anchor Dobbs was for Republicans in a lot of states. The thing is, though, Donald Trump isn't trying to fool everybody. Like, he's just trying to create some space for a couple of specific categories of voters, you know, particularly younger men, for example, who are like pro-choice and would probably vote for pro-choice referenda in these states, but also prefer Donald Trump to Kamala Harris and are looking for a fig leaf to do so. Right? Like, people who are a little less engaged, less focused, and we've all seen the viral videos of people on campuses blaming Joe Biden for the overturn of Roe v. Wade that happened under his watch. Right? Like, there are lower info voters out there that he's trying to project to them. You don't have to be scared of me. I'm not one of these crazy far-right Christians like these others. As a policy matter, nothing's going to change, but that's what he's trying to do as a political matter.
Yeah, Julie, I was looking back in 1993. That's right when Ohio enshrined the right to reproductive abortion access to reproductive rights into their constitution. This is what J.D. Vance wrote on social media. There is something sociopathic about a political movement that tells young women and men that it is liberating to murder their own children. I don't think there's any ambiguity, right, about that statement, but to Tim's point, there are low information voters. There are voters who may care about this issue, but they're not necessarily going to vote on it. And if Donald Trump can convince even some of those that maybe for other reasons, economic reasons, border reasons, the kind of issues that we know he's leading on, that those are more important, it's a win.
Well, yes. I mean, look, there are suburban women out there who historically have voted Republican who now are voting Democrat in part because of this issue. But look, they didn't just fall off the turnip truck. This was the biggest story of the last 2 or 3 years, that Roe versus Wade was overturned, and now states have the right, including places like Pennsylvania, if they had a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, they now have the right to potentially ban abortion. Places like Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which he needs to win. Places like Northampton County that he needs to win in Pennsylvania. And so it's a problem for him because these are voters who are incredibly attuned to what's been going on in the last few years. And again, they know what Donald Trump has done. They don't need to take him at his word that he'll do something else because the record is there. Roe versus Wade is no longer the law of the land because of one man and one man only, and that is Donald Trump. He appointed those justices. Those justices overturned Roe versus Wade, and he's bragged about it, and he's said how thrilled he was about it. So why do we have to believe that anything's going to be different? And to the point that was made earlier, he's going to appoint the very people into his administration that Tony Perkins loves, that these pro-life evangelicals love, because that's who's staffing the Trump administration next time around. There's not going to be anybody to stop him.
We've got less than a minute here, Tim, but what are the states, what are among the battleground states, the places where you think that Donald Trump could, if not make progress on this issue, that it will be less impactful than in some others?
Yeah, I think about two groups in particular. One, white working class women. You know, Kamala Harris needs to try to do a little bit better than Biden did with that group because we're post-Dobbs. And I think that she's got to convince those voters that he's a threat to their reproductive rights. And he's got to kind of convince them that they should stick with him. A lot of these are like the Obama, Trump voters, particularly women. And then the group that I mentioned before, younger men. And Susie Wiles, the Trump campaign manager, has said she's trying to reach out to like younger black and brown men and try to gain a little ground with them. They're going to tend to be pro-choice most of all, but he's trying to convince them that that they shouldn't lump him in with some of the more extreme people on that issue. I think he's going to struggle with both groups, but those are, I think, the two kind of battlegrounds here.
Garrett Haake, Julie Roginski, and Tim Miller, thank you.